Well met, everyone. I am Rich Delich, and today is another fun fight video. Let's jump into it. You know the routine. I'm going to use a D&D dice roller app, online, whatever. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up D&D Beyond, and we will take a look at how many monsters we have going on here. There's some new monsters that were added with Ghosts of Saltmarsh. We have 73 pages of monsters. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the D&D dice roller, and I'm going to roll percentile dice. Anything 74% and above, I will ignore. 17. So what that tells me is we will pick a random monster somewhere on page 17. Now, if you are not familiar with the process here, what I do is the Fun Fights video series is intended to create more interesting, challenging, and quite simply fun encounters and fights. And by doing this randomly, where I determine a random monster that is picked from the D&D Beyond interface, where because I have all the content, I do have every monster, I believe so, every official monster that's been released. And by doing it randomly and creating this encounter based on the various traits, attributes, and abilities of the monster, and doing it on the fly as the video is recording, you can see sort of my creative process that I may go through, which hopefully can help you take it to your table so that when you create your own encounters, you're getting a lot more variety than just the monster hits or misses your PCs, the PCs hit or miss your monster, so on and so forth ad nauseum until one side wins. So oftentimes I will not just work with the monster itself to create an interesting encounter. The environment, the place where this encounter takes place, provides its own challenge, its own threat. So as I said, let's just see what we've got. So here's page 17. I believe there's always 20 monsters on the page, but let me check. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 at the DROW house captain. 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a D20, and I will roll, and we have a 4. Which means for today, we will use 1, 2, 3, 4. We will use a very basic DROW. All right? So, quite simple. What I'm going to do first is I print screen. As we jump over to Photoshop, let's do this. I just did a little cut and paste. I'm going to take this thing here. I need it for reference. Also, when I do these videos, the intention is to be able to print out what you see here on screen and take this with me to the table, and it's sort of my cheat sheet, what I can use with me as I go through. Now, this part is completely unnecessary, but it just keeps me being creative. It keeps me floating. So I create just some aesthetic to it. I like having that bold line around it. I'm going to do a bit of a zoom in here. And let's see what we're working with. Okay, so we have a DROW. Well, Underdark, right? But because of the storyline of Dritz Do'Urden, you can also say that this encounter does not necessarily have to be in the Underdark. It can be something above ground. Let's ride with the stereotype, the typical of it. Let's keep him as neutral evil as he is, so he's an enemy here. The intention of these videos is always to have an encounter where there is a conflict. It's not a social encounter. It isn't just a roleplay thing, and there isn't any parlay. One side is going to win, but as I said, I want to create a little more interest so it's not just, do you hit him for enough damage until he dies, okay? So first and foremost, one thing I always like to do when we have a low CR, I'm not going to try and balance and juggle in the CR of this thing. That's up to you to decide. I just want to show you sort of my process of how I can make things a little more challenging, a little more interesting. I always want to up their hit points a little bit. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to simply take the max value. So even though he has 3d8 hit points listed here, I'm going to say this dude has 24 hit points. We'll leave his AC the same. If you start buffing things up and doubling, and 24 hit points is double his hit points, what's listed basically. If I start doubling the AC, obviously 30 is unrealistic, but you don't want to create something that becomes tedious at that point, because remember, even though he's got increased hit points, it's still within the range of what would have been possible. Therefore, I don't really need to manipulate the CR too much, which means this is still a viable encounter for a lower level group. If I was to up his AC by a significant amount, you have to be careful of how that stuff might snowball, because now what's going to happen is your PCs aren't going to be able to hit him, and your intention for creating an interesting combat now just becomes really tedious. So What we'll do is we'll leave the AC the same. His speed will be the same. That's fine. His stats, all this other stuff. You have to be careful when you have a real low CR monster that you're dealing with and you want to manipulate some things. Maybe don't change him around too much, but make something interesting with the environment, okay? What I want to do is I want to point you real quick to an individual. He's sort of my creative D&D muse. His name is Brunehammer. He's got a bunch of YouTube videos, a Patreon. I support him on Patreon. He's a fascinatingly creative individual. He has just years of videos on sort of what I'm doing. He's kind of been my inspiration of sort of taking... I've done this stuff for 30 years. I've been a DM for 30 years. But he has, in recent years, sort of highlighted to me sort of an elegant way of putting it into words, something that I haven't been able to wrap my head around of how or why I do it. He quantifies it for me. So he helps me find some steps that I can go through for this creative process. And one thing he always talks about is timers and having an environment play into the conflict itself. The reason why you don't want to manipulate this guy too much is because he's such a low CR that you're going to start to skew that CR very quickly by adding in various traits and abilities, and you give him something that gives him advantage and magic items and all this other stuff, and now he has, you know, second, third level spells, so on and so forth. So we're going to leave him the same. I'm going to leave his stats. I'm going to leave everything the same. Let's see if there's anything we can run with here. So we have this sunlight sensitivity. Okay. I may play into that by having something really harsh in the environment, but I'll create some sort of a trigger or a mechanic that the PCs can interact with that might be in their favor, where it might let in shafts of sunlight, where if the drow, or if I decide to create multiple drow, if they're ever inside of that, that is to the benefit of the PCs because they're now going to have disadvantage on attack rolls, okay? So we've got short swords and hand crossbows, and they have poison on them, and if you fail by a lot, you're going to be unconscious. So that's always a big thing. That can be a massive threat. So I want to ride that wave a little bit with the hand crossbow, the range of that, and the fact that the lethality of this encounter oftentimes is based on you possibly failing that con save, which makes you unconscious, which now you're dealing with a major threat. So what I want to do is I'm going to create an Underdark cavern. We'll go like this. Pretty simple. Okay, somewhere over here is the long winding corridor. All right, multiple paths and branches. It's Underdark, right? You don't know what the hell you get half the time. So there's all this just stuff down here, whatever. And this is where we'll use a different color. I can't see my screen, so give me a second. We'll use blue for the PCs. So the PCs, we'll say there's 1, 2, 3. There's 4 PCs, and then we'll use red. Next time I will change my camera angle a bit because this is causing me some issues here. We will use red for the drow. So what I'm going to do is, sorry, let me change this back. I'm going to create, there's a shelf, a ledge, if you will. Okay, against this far end. And then over here is just sort of this. Bear with me a moment. I'm doing a little bit of just artistry. Just creating some depth and some height, some terrain. If you don't have the chops to draw it, I mean, I'm not the best artist either, but if you can't draw it, it's no big deal. Just explain it. Just let the PCs know that there's this ledge here. There's some rocks here. So they can maybe get to those specific spots. Yeah, you might want to grid this if you're using gridded combat, right? I'm not going to worry about this too much. But we can kind of go like this a little bit. Just so we can kind of delineate where the spots are, where the PCs might have to maybe stand in order to access these rocks. Okay, so we have this cool bit going on, and then we're going to come across, of course, boom, come like that, this way. That was huge. So we'll go here, and then here. This is the good bits. So Doesn't have to be exact. I'm just trying to get an overall aesthetic of just some space. See where things are. See where I want the guys to be. So on and so forth. And that's really all I need here is just a little bit to work with for me. Okay, so there's these rocks in these various places. There's this rock here. So if the PCs can get to these specifically, they can just make a simple athletics, kind of like a jump check, to get up onto this ledge. Okay, so I'm going to create that as a bullet point. Use rocks to get on ledge. Okay, let's move this over here so I can see everything. Okay, and then the DROW, stay as long as they can at range to take, I'm going to use the word advantage. It doesn't mean double D20s of poison hand crossbow. Okay? So they're going to stay up here. And as I said, I'm going to make the DROW red. We know the PCs are blue. So there's a DROW here. There's a bunch. I don't remember exact encounter design. I'd have to look through. I have the gist of it from the DMG, but I think it's where at a quarter CR, remember, we're not, other than giving him hit points, but it's still within his range, we're not manipulating this guy too much, so we're not changing him. Yes, we can make the encounter more lethal and the whole thing more dangerous and challenging because of environmental issues. If I said that this is all molten lava on the floor and the PCs can't stand on it and they take 1d10 fire every round, this is no longer a CR 1/4 encounter, but I digress. So I think with encounter design, 4 of these would be equivalent to like 1 PC type of guy, right? So it's okay that I have 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I have 9 DROW. So they outnumber the PCs. That's fine. They will stay up here as much as I can. Now, I'm not going to give them cover, all right? They're not shooting from murder holes, arrow slits. They don't have... Yes, they should probably have a bunch of wood barricades and things like that, but I'm not going to give them cover. It's not a big deal with that. It's enough at this low encounter level, this low CR, it's enough that I just say that they're at this elevated terrain. So your tactical aspect of having the ability to shoot from higher ground, it's enough that at low level, the PCs probably don't have a lot of Misty Step, Dimension Door, and Flight. So they're not going to be able to get up there very easily. So I don't want to give them any extra cover. It's enough of an advantage for them just being up there. So the bulk of the threat is really just going to be that. Okay, now what I can do if I feel like I need to create something a little more interesting is these rocks might be sort of surrounded by this weird underdarky energy. I don't know what the hell that means, but there's something going on here. So yes, the PCs can use these to make jump checks. Yes, they can get up here and make climb checks to climb their way up onto these ledges. But the climb check is basically going to take a full round because they have to make that athletic checks, right? Athletics check. But also, it may take 1 or 2 rounds. And then if they get shot or knocked unconscious, I can simply say, I mean, remember, these guys have a range of 30 to 120. So yes, the PCs can sit back here and nuke and throw fireballs behind this line. Well, not fireballs because it's low level. But there may be a couple of rangers in the party, so they have range as well. But what I can say is that the key item, and we'll put this in purple, what they're coming here for is right here. Okay? X equals the room objective. Whatever the hell you want it to be. It can be a cocooned, remember, you're in the Underdark. It can be a cocooned, princess that they need to rescue, Mario Brothers stuff. Whatever you want it to be, you can video game it. It can be a magic item that they're looking for, something, something that's going to help them get through a door further on in the adventure, whatever it may be. So they need to get close enough that this thing is high enough that we're talking 30, 40 feet up. Yes, you're kind of getting disadvantaged because of this range, because beyond 30 feet it's disadvantage and they can't shoot any further than 120. But if they can keep shooting shots, at the PCs into any one of these sort of squares here, that's going to be a problem. So you need to make sure that you funnel the PCs towards the DROW, all right? Now, there's something going on here around these rocks. By getting to a rock, they have to deal with the threat of that. Whatever that is, I'm going to leave it. I'm just showing you the creative thing. I'm not trying to wrangle in all the mechanics of it. I'm just showing you the random creative process of what you can think through to start creating some more interest. So I don't know what's going on here, but by getting onto these rocks, the PCs have to deal with the consequence of dealing with whatever's going on there. Maybe the rocks are sinking. Maybe there's fire in that spot. Maybe they're in jeopardy of failing a save and taking an additional 1d8 damage. For a low-level encounter, just to get onto the rocks themselves, the possibility of taking 8 damage is a threat. So they have to deal with that consequence, but the benefit of getting to these 4 rocks is they just simply make one athletics check and they get onto the ledge. Whereas the climbing, if I make this high enough, they've got to make 3 to 4 checks to get up there. And then if they get shot and fail that save and get knocked unconscious, you're now falling from 30, 40 feet up. So you're dealing with 3 to 4d6 falling damage. Remember, you're at a low enough level in this encounter that the PCs don't have fly. They probably don't have all the resources to just be expending featherfall and things of that nature. They don't have magic items to deal with that stuff. So it's advisable for them to get up there quickly, but in order to do so, they need to put themselves in harm's way with these rocks. So give them that out of, there's a way you can get up without taking damage, assuming you make the check, but it's going to take you more time. Or you can expedite it and take less time, but you're taking the threat of possibly taking damage. Or you can just simply stay out here, but you can't stay back here forever, because at some point, someone's going to have to jump up here and come get this thing. Don't let it be mage-handed or anything like that. And then if they are making their way in, and let's say this one PC makes his way over here and he drops over here, even if you've got range guy 1, 2, and 3 back here throwing cantrips and bow and arrow and stuff, they need to go get and retrieve that body. So now that kind of puts them in that military war type atmosphere, right? Where they need to rescue the body of the fallen companion and get him out. All right? And now whatever object he was holding, you know, from the objective thing has just and it sort of fallen to the ground. And now someone needs to go get the body out and pick him back up. So that's the bulk of it. We don't have to make it too complex, because you have to still stay, and that's the beauty of doing this randomly, I have to still stay within the CR overall, what the gist of this is intending to be. If I start giving this guy disintegrates and all kinds of magic items and spells, and he turns into Jarlaxle or Dritz, and he's a level 17 ranger, I've now changed the encounter so much that I'm not working within the confines of what my limitations are, which is the basics of what does this drow offer me. And by having a lowest, other than a 1/8 challenge rating, basically a really, really low level encounter, I don't want to do too much. It's enough of a threat to just have them at high levels, you know, or distance where they have the chance to possibly knock the group unconscious before they even engage. Now, you need to make some modifications and make some changes, because one thing you do need to consider is what is the makeup of your party. If they are entirely all melee, they should be decent at athletics and climbing, because as melee characters, they're generally going to be strength-based. But if they're entirely all melee, not only do they have to get up here to do anything to the drow to take out that threat, they're going to have to get up there. Whereas if you have mostly range group of these 4, that could change the dynamics of the encounter. Maybe you have some harsh, you know, as they come in, they realize that there's the caverns of this Underdark are sort of crumbling. Like the dwarves, what is the Moria thing? They dug too deep for too long. And what's happening is the floor is starting to fall away and crumble. And maybe roll like a die, and every 1, 2, 3 rounds, an entire 5-foot grid just collapses, pushing the group forward a lot. And eventually, they're going to be sort of confined to this area where they're now within range of the bolts and so on. So I think that's it. There's some good bits there. Take it with you. Use some of the principles, the ideas, or at least the process, not the exact mechanics. It doesn't matter. You can wrangle in the CRs of things and exactly who attacks on when and what their, what the DC is and how high this thing is and so on and so forth. It's just the idea of approaching this normally low-level drow encounter and spicing it up a little bit. So hope that helped. Thanks everyone for watching. Take care.